Okay, you know what? I'm sitting here at the studio. Welcome to Shay. Currently in need of a little bit of decorating, but we're getting there. Anyway, this is where I do a lot of my editing because this computer's slightly faster for that type of stuff. Warm up 57. It didn't clock. It didn't register rather that there's a very famous warm up already called Warm Up 57 from the Dog Reinhardt material. And in fact, I actually recorded a video reviewing and sharing my thoughts on this video about 3 years ago. If you want to check out that video, then there'll be a link up there or something. I'll put it in cards. And I suppose this warm up is going to have to be referred to as either not the Doc Reinhardt warm up 57 warm up video or routine, or maybe just something like the Heinz 57 warm up routine. I don't know if there's a copyright issue or there or no, whatever. But anyway, yeah, I thought I would just add that wee caveat in there. So on with the video. Cheers now. Just waiting in that last video, transferring over to Dropbox because WeTransfer doesn't seem to work anymore. Oh, I sound awful grumpy in my old age. And my internet connection, I'm getting really grumpy, which is irrelevant to anything on this channel, really. My internet connection is worse from being upgraded to 4G stroke, not really available 5G because 3G isn't in use anymore. That's progress for you. So I figured I would just make the video that I talked about at the end of the last video, which I hope you watched, because if you don't know what I'm talking about, then, well, that last part of that, 45 seconds of chat is irrelevant. Anyway, we're going to look at a little thing that I put together called Warm Up 57, which, if I'm still got any of my media skills, you should be able to see on the screen just now. Now, why Warm Up 57? There probably are around about 56 other warm-ups that I've put together and worked on. God knows plenty of other people have put them on. But I spent a lot of time this term, this year, so thinking about from August through to December 2025. Grade 5, grade 6 students, ABSM, Trinity, doesn't really matter. I think it's the same the world over. Who can't really play to the top of the stave. Now, range isn't everything. We know this. Can't really play to the top of the stave, even on C major. What does that mean? Well, it means two things. That I'm potentially a rubbish teacher, or the need to understand or have a global appreciation for the fundamentals of playing an instrument and getting the most that you can from it are hard to learn. You know, it's like if you're, I don't know, 13, 14 years old, or give or take 5 years either side of that, there's a lot going on in your life, especially if you're at school and you got exams going on or you got other activities and everything. So what I thought was, let's streamline this. Let's give our amazing young people the chance to actually exceed. And a really, really good friend of mine, I almost feel like he's a mentor in some ways, only a few years older than me. He runs or co-directs Oi Music Art and Brass Blast side of thing. And it's been said before, but it's nice to hear him say it as well. It's like set them up for a win, basically. So what I've done is, and I know this has been done before, but I've done it my way. What I've done is I've put together a little exercise called Warm Up 57 that will get the chops going, get a little bit of flexibilities going, get some scale work going, get some tonguing and some finger technique happening. And here's the thing, apart from the flexibility exercise, which is really only an evolution of grade 1 flexibilities, I'm going to use Trinity because that's what I mostly teach. It's really only an evolution of grade 1 Trinity. Everything's in C major. Now, why is that important? Why is that important? Because it's the first scale you learn, really. Maybe G major if you're on an E flat instrument, or B flat major if you're on a concert instrument. 90% of my kids my students are on B flat instruments, and that's it. And I've done variations of this on all the other exercises. Keys anyway. So the thing about C major is that there's no key signature. Now, you could easily apply or overlay key signatures to any aspect of this, and I'll maybe get a chance to go into that. Or maybe I won't. Maybe we'll just keep it simple and leave it as it is. But really, what my plan was, or is, and I think this is a key part of it, this little exercise has to be memorised. Part of the reason I think why there's a barrier in a percentage, portion, whatever you want to use, trumpet students, musicians, yeah, let's stick with trumpet, because really brass is what we're talking about, and I'm talking trumpet. A big problem is learning the valves and learning the key signatures and all that goes with that, whilst you're trying to build up your range. At no point really in any of the early Trinity grade music, grades 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, let's say up to 6, do you ascend through the register without learning a new key signature? Now think about that. To play up to, okay, F or G major, yeah, you kind of have to learn a key signature, and that's absolutely fine. What if you didn't? To play up to A, you got another key signature. And that's fine. I'm not saying that we don't have to learn the key signature. All I'm saying is what about if you could already play up there and then overlay the key signature on it? So I'm going to get into this little exercise now. I'm not sure how I'm going to do it. I'm just going to run through the exercise. I'll dip in and out. You won't see any of that. I'll do an edit. I'll do talk over the top of it, blah, blah, blah. And then we'll get to the end of the video. Okay? Yeah, enjoy. This is a warm-up 57. Oh yeah, incidentally, why warm-up 57? Because it's got a little bit of everything in it. If anyone's familiar with the Heinz brand of soup, usually, or Heinz beans, everyone talks about Heinz 57. We talk about it with dogs and mongrels and things like that. 57 different brands or styles of food. And I always remember it in tomato soup, which was a go-to when I was a kid growing up. So that's why, because really it's got a little bit of everything in it. It's got the base ingredients of everything that you need to really start getting to grips with the fundamentals of playing trumpet, we'll say brass, but a trumpet or cornet in this case, over 2 octaves with fingering and articulation to see you up to around about grade 7, grade 8 range. I'm not talking about key signatures. I'm not talking about all that type of stuff as well. I'm talking about the fundamentals that you can overlay all that type of stuff on. I'm sure there's going to be loads, well, maybe 2. I'm lucky if I get 3 comments nowadays. There'll be a comment about why you must always stick with key signatures and everything else. Anyway, interesting to know your thoughts. Here we go, warm up 57. Here's the first bit. It's not really plagiarism because everyone does a lip flap, but right, okay, on to some trumpety stuff. Alright, so first 3 components there, lip flap. I genuinely do think that's the most important thing a brass player can do. Activates head, ear, lips. And that triple, that's the embouchure as far as I'm concerned. Not the head and the thinking, the head and the concentrating. As soon as you start thinking, then that actually removes one leg or one side of the triangle. We have to be concentrating. We're thinking. We're concentrating on making sound. We're concentrating on making music. We're concentrating on making the trumpet work. The second part is the no expectations G. I've talked about that for years now. Part of the lesson that I had with Greg Spence was about a non-activated breath, and I had a lovely week or two with a lot of my students talking about a balloon. Incidentally, my balloon's purple, because that's my favourite colour, and the balloon, singular balloon, because I couldn't afford two balloons, look at there, dangling all by itself, represents our lungs, of course. So when we take a big breath in, the balloon expands downwards and outwards and around. And part of the idea of this came from Greg Spence talking and using the language about a non-activated breath. So not having any abdominal support in terms of activating our diaphragm or any of that type of theory of how we compress air. It's a passive air in and out. And if you want to check that out, check out Mystery to Mastery. It's just, he's got such a beautiful way of talking about it. Way more in depth and way more to the point than I'm talking about here. But this is like an image I'm trying to get for the kids. So you take your breath, you've got your balloon, purple balloon in my case, and on top of this balloon is us, our neck, our head, etc., all that type of thing. And we've got an instrument attached to our mouth or sitting on our face. So it's balloon, head, neck, that type of stuff. Instrument. We do have to still form an embouchure. And you're just letting the air out. And that's where Greg also talks about it's as easy as talking, playing a brass instrument. So that no expectation G then forms our first note. It might not be a G, it might come out as a C. That's why there's no expectations. The second one is actual played G with a slight crescendo on it. Okay. And you might have to go around each of those three aspects a couple of times before you move on. So lip flap a few times, see if a note comes out, it doesn't go back. See if a note comes out, it does, great, fantastic. Try a crescendo, or if you're diminuendo on the second one and it falls down, etc. We've done this before, all that type of stuff. Anyway, so we're going to move on now to the flexibility section. Now, a little bit of chat just about this flexibility section. This study is aimed at everyone who is at least grade 1 and onwards. This warm-up is not for pre-grade 1 because I expect that everyone can at least play a third space C on a B-flat trumpet or cornet. And the reason for that is this is supposed to be progressive. You know, we've got to be really kind of mindful and nurturing when we're bringing kids up, etc. To first of all put an instrument in the face and get a sound to come out, but then also to develop that to the point of getting the grade 1. And as soon as we can start to, I really feel as soon as we can start to push beyond the boundaries of what a grade system is and just get kids playing higher and faster, because they're always experimenting, then we do that. And this, I like to think this warm-up actually addresses part of that. Right, okay, so on to the next part. Okay, here we go. So we've all seen those flexibilities before, that type of thing. I've got slow flexibilities in warm-up that I think I've shared on here. We've also got, that's, I think, exercise 14 from Max Loschberg. It's everywhere. It's rife. Yeah, we're rife with plagiarism. But because they work, what I try to emphasize with that exercise when I'm doing it with my students is that you're not blowing. It's like the easier you can get the higher notes to come out. Even just going from the initial G to the C and then coming back up through the C, G, C, and that very, very first flexibility. Leaning on that concept that Greg's talked about with non-activated air, and trying to get the idea that the air coming out of his steered into position with the embouchure and maybe just a little bit of tongue lift, etc. I'm not going to go into that. That's not the point of it. If my students can get this to happen with a degree of ease and they're not making the sound really balloon to get that note to pop out, then I'm happy with that. So as long as it sounds about they're trying to get the note to come out through blowing hard. So we've all heard this. Yeah, we want to steer away from that as much as possible. We can use that, and we can use that air to talk about our corners, come together to grab that energy and try and get that energy to get the note to flick up again. But that's a different lesson for a different time. And then when we repeat the exercise, or when we do the exercise in reverse and we just go up to the third partial, we might not be able to get that, and this is where the modifications come in. We could extend this exercise up, as Collins does, as so many other studies do, in terms of we just keep adding a partial onto it. But that's not really a warm-up. That's more kind of getting into a maintenance type study or developmental type study. This is supposed to be a warm-up. The entirety of this first section, from lip flap to the end of the exposition of the scale work that we're just about to get into, I have time for about 7 minutes. So we'll get into that now. Now what we're looking at here is C major. That's the key here. That's the point here as well, is that we're not doing anything more than C major. And what's really interesting is that the way we develop this C major scale, so basically what we're going to do is we're going to go the modes of C major, so we're not doing anything other than starting C major on a different note. Really, really messes with a lot of my students. Even some of the more advanced classical students, mature students who are used to just playing their scales. So the first variation we're going to do, and it's not much of a variation, is just bottom C to top D and then back down to bottom C. Full to neutral accents all the way. Nice clean articulations, nice clean finger work. Nothing about it, as beige as it can be, other than going up to the D at the top. Really, really messes with some. I'll do a couple of these just for the sake of doing them, and then we'll pause before we do the final exposition. Okay. Okay, really, really quite straightforward. And the last one just resolves back down to our C. The last one, G to A, is actually the last part. Yes, it is, of the exposition. So, we're just going up our C major, starting on a different note. Yeah, we're going one higher, but it just adds in that aspect of adding on range and doing something a little bit different. So I mentioned about being grade 1 to 6 and grade 6 being approximately in Trinity up to our A. Now, it might very well be that if you've got a student coming out of grade 1, they can't play above a D. That's as high as they've had to play. I would like to think that most of our students are doing slightly more than the bare minimum to achieve the standards that they need to satisfy the grade that they're working on. I happen to know for a fact that that isn't always true, and when you ask certain grade 8 students to play their C scale, they say, wait, that starts off with open and 1 and 3, doesn't it? Quickly followed by a withering look from me. Anyway, so not getting into that too much, losing his train of thought. We're looking at a way of developing range with familiarity of the scale. And like I said, we can overlay scales and key signatures on this. So as you're going up each one of these modal scales from C to D and back down, and then D to E, when you get to D, you can put the D major scale on there. And it's the exact same thing in terms of the range that we're looking at. If you wanted to overlay D major on this and have them play an F sharp and a C sharp, absolutely no problem whatsoever. Same with E, same with F, same with G, etc., and then come back down. And there's a whole different realm in there in terms of developing this type of base fundamental study. That's not what this study is about. It's about accessing the full range that we need to have on tap to do the things that are required of us if we've got a goal like the grades to achieve. The other happy side effect of this is that the student becomes familiar with moving up and down the scale, albeit from a starting note, but not always on the starting note of the scale. We're starting in D and C, we're starting in E, so you get in there your Phrygian sound. On F, you get your Lydian sound, all that type of thing. These are sounds that are part of music. Not every tune starts on the diatonic, starts in the tonic of the scale that we're using. Sorry, that was a bit of a kind of waffle there. Okay, so now on to the exposition of this. So the exposition ties all of these scales together in one go. That's bearing in mind this is grade 1 to 6. Okay, here we go. And that's all it is. And we played from a C all the way up to an A. We've done some interesting movement throughout what we know our C major scale. We've got over an octave and a half locked in. And hopefully, if we're able to encourage the student through all their grades, etc., then this is just like it's a good launching off point to not have to worry about your key signature and your valves and everything whilst having to worry about play your higher notes. Something that I try and stress as well with all my students is that this should be as beige as possible. There's next to no musicality into it. Now we can add in, like we did with the key signatures, talking about the key signatures, you can add in all your different types of articulations in there: staccato, classical, and jazz stroke commercial. I specify a tenuto accent or tenuto style of playing so that every note is full all the way through. And another thing that I try to stress as well is that there's no increase or decrease in dynamics as we're ascending. We're trying to learn a conformity of embouchure shape and support, so that anything that has to be added in for musical reasons can then be added in. For example, the scale work, I think it's chromatic scale work in the Trinity music from the chromatic scale onwards asks us to start soft and then get louder as we go up, etc. And that's all there. And we will learn all that type of stuff. Remember, this exercise is about doing that, but you can overlay that as you go through, or if you want to develop this exercise. So now we move on to grade 6 to 8 level. So it's like if your if your student is competent up to this level and they want to progress onwards, then hopefully if they're playing up to grade 6, so around about an A, they're actually already exploring the upper registers. So up to a B, up to a C, potentially a D. So if you are progressing into grade 6, 7 and 8, then you can do the G up to the A, then back down to the C if you want. But where we are now, we're progressing on to the A, up to the B up to the C, and then the C up to the D and all the way down. Here we go. Okay, so the final part of this is the exposition of those scales again, but it's the full collection of scales from C to C all the way through. So if you think about some of the performance pieces in grade 7 and grade 8, there's a lot of playing in them. There's a lot of like repetitive playing, tonguing in scales, and even though we're still in C major, still very, very important, we have to be able to learn to manage our breath and articulations and finger work for clarity over that full range of the piece. To my knowledge, the highest note we have to play in almost all the pieces, I don't think there's anywhere above a C in grade 8. But if I've got to play up to a C, then I want to make sure my D's in place, and that's just a given rule, because if you're always playing to the upper limits of your range, then there might be a chance that you might not get that upper limit of your range when it's important. All right, so this is the final exposition. A note on tempo. I would challenge anyone who's doing this to play it as cleanly, as comfortably, as slowly as possible for clarity if you want to speed up the tempo. And again, you could do this as double tonguing. It's not about that though, but it's about executing what's required of you as cleanly and as comfortably as possible. Let's give it a go. I wonder how many takes it's going to take. Okay, there was one me crack in there. The first one I forgot where it went to, and I went up to an E. That's a little bit excessive. And the second one I just forgot where I was. It's been a long day. I was working in the jazz bar last night till 2:30. Can you see the bags under my eyes? Anyway, so that's the exposition of the final part of Warm Up 57. Free exercise I'm chucking out for you folks, especially if you're a tutor, and I don't know, sometimes you just feel really, 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 really frustrated in terms of lack of progress. Another key point of this that I want you to try and take away is that it's supposed to be memorised. If you can't memorise your C major scale, then you've got issues. I'm sorry, it's got to be as plain as that. If you're not getting locked into your C major scale and you have to be spoon-fed every little bit of musical knowledge or musical technical ability, then, well, I don't know. Maybe you should be doing something else. Which is a little bit of a negative context. I don't want to think about that. It's really about trying to open up the door in terms of this is something that you can do. You can learn this, or our students can learn this and feel progressive with it, because it allows you to play up into the upper register. And I've already had quite a few success stories, even just with some of the younger ones being able to play at the top of the scale a D. You know, it's like, as far as they were aware, the C was the top of the scale. To know that there's notes above that, unbelievable, amazing. And that they could play them, maybe they couldn't play them straight away, but then they could play them after a week or two and trying to get the D. Then what's after the D? It's an E. That's amazing. It's absolutely cool. So all those little things there come together to hopefully having a nice little learning experience. All right, so I'm going to wind it up there. It's freezing. I've not been able to turn my heater on for about 30 odd minutes. Way longer than I intended this video to be. If you want to reach out for any more of the studies or things that I work on, pop me an email. You can get me best at cjtrumpet@googlemail.com, or you can get a hold of me via the Facebook page, Cameron J Trumpet. I am working on a separate channel. I had loads of content and my main computer died my home computer where I back up all of my video work. And the hard drive fried itself due to a Windows issue. Lost it all. That channel will have musical content in it, but it's more from the other side of the fence of being a bloke who plays trumpet and drives motorbikes, fixes cars and does gigs and things like that. Hopefully a little bit more interesting in terms of, the other side of the studio, which is kind of a bit of a junk room right now. Anyway, starting to waffle. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. I hope you found this interesting. I'll try and get a link via G Drive or something, or Google, where you can access a copy of this PDF if you so want to. And comments and thoughts are always welcome. Keep them clean. This channel is open to everyone and constructive as well. Even if it's a negative comment, let's just keep it constructive. Okie dokie. That's all, folks. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. Don't forget to practice and stay smart. Ugh.